And we're live.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our listening session for August. I'm Mayor Lauren McLean. First off, a couple logistics. Thanks for the questions that you submitted in advance. We'll be answering those first, and then we'll bring in questions that people leave on the YouTube chat as we go through the meeting. Sierra McIver is here with us today. Welcome back, Sierra, as our ASL interpreter. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our listening session for August. I'm Mayor Lauren McLean. First off, a couple logistics. Thanks for the questions that you submitted in advance. We'll be answering those first, and then we'll bring in questions that people leave on the YouTube chat as we go through the meeting. Sierra McIver is here with us today. Welcome back, Sierra. Hi there. I'm sorry. I had some technical issue because I didn't realize it, but the YouTube was playing as well in my background. So suddenly I started talking to myself and seeing Sierra signing what I was saying. I got a little confused. We're back. I've turned that off. All should be good now. I thank Sierra for signing today. I wanted to point out the background that I'm using today. It is art by Stephanie Inman that was created for our celebration of 100 years of women's suffrage. In January, we had a special proclamation recognizing that 2020 was the year in which we celebrate the signing of the 19th Amendment, and that we have far to go because that amendment gave white women the right to vote, but many years and much work later, other women received the right to vote. And next Wednesday, we will be doing a virtual dedication of a piece of art that is the installation of Stephanie Inman's quilt that is on Main Street outside City Hall. So at 10 o'clock, we'll have a virtual dedication that you can watch live through links through the city. Go to cityofboise.org to check that out. And so this is just a piece of it, but you see there's I'm trying to point to it, the woman with the shield that is part of our state's emblem. And then the old original City Hall is behind me. Of course, it says vote, vote, vote. This is just one section of a larger quilt that depicts the work and the efforts that women took to secure the right to vote 100 years ago. So thanks for joining us. I want to say a couple things before we get started, and that is to start this with a thanks to each of you for the sacrifices that you've made, and for those of you, many of you who have come together as a community to help us weather these times. It makes a difference. We at the City of Boise are here in service to our community, and what makes Boise so special is that so many residents seek ways to support our community, whether it be volunteering, the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that came together through the United Way Day of Caring to help provide school lunches, other organizations and efforts that I've seen firsthand in the last couple months where people are supporting people through these tough times. And school started virtually this week. First off, to the teachers, I salute you. I am a parent of a junior in high school in the Boise School District, and have really appreciated how available and present my son's teachers have been for him as he's started in a way that he'd rather not have to start, which is in his room with a Chromebook in a Google Classroom. And it's hard enough being a high schooler to do that, but for all of you parents who are supporting younger kids trying to do the same thing, it's super tough. And just want to say thanks to all of you as well as you juggle supporting your children, supporting our teachers, and then working and doing all that we have to do to get through these times. So normally I'd say happy back to school. I will say happy back to school, but recognize that it's much tougher and less celebratory than it's been in the past. And with that, Lana Graybill is here as always to moderate questions and to ask me the ones that have been put together in advance, but then to call on you that are watching live and leaving your questions as we have time. We only have an hour, and so we'll get through as much as we can in that time. And with that, Lana, I think I'll kick it over to you.
Great, thank you. I just have a quick couple of things to get to. So I just want to reiterate that we will do our very best to get to as many questions as possible. We got some really great ones in advance, so we'll start with those. You'll notice that some of them I will paraphrase just for time's sake, and we did get a couple that were along the same topic, so I did combine those. If yours is a question we don't get to, please feel free to use the link in the online forum. It should be in the YouTube chat to submit your question, and we will get back to you with an answer. For the majority of this, I will be turning off my camera so that Sierra ASL interpreter can be side by side with the mayor. And that's all my updates. So let's get started with questions. So the first question, Mayor, is from somebody that just identifies as B from the central bench. And B is asking, why are masks required?
Sure. Hi, B. Thanks for submitting your question in advance. Masks are required because both the federal medical officers, the scientists nationally, and others have all said that the most effective way, there are two things to do. The most effective way to curb the spread of the virus is to wear masks so that if you have it, you're not giving it to others, and to stay distant from each other. So again, if you don't have one on, or even if you do have one on, there's more space between you and others so that if you have it and don't know, you're not giving it to others. And then of course, washing your hands, et cetera. We instituted a mask order because I talked a lot and often with the heads of all the hospital systems here in Boise and the Treasure Valley, with CEOs of businesses who are working with me on developing a plan for how we restart the economy and get going. And then other health professionals were saying, this is what we must do. And even Dr. Birx nationally has said the most, having masks and distancing, if everyone does it, is as effective or can be as effective as stage 1 closures. So we don't want to close things. We want to get open. We want to get our kiddos back in school. We want to keep our residents and people back at work. So the best way to do that, to ensure that our hospitals aren't overrun with those most vulnerable that might have the virus, is to require masks. We did it first in Boise. We felt like we needed to act quickly. And I say first in the county, Treasure Valley, and then the Central District Health Board did the same a couple weeks later. And so now actually it's while the city has an order, it's the Central District Health Order that preempts us because of their kind of policy positioning around health issues.
Thank you. The next question is from Rachel, and Rachel didn't share her location. And so really quickly for those on YouTube, if you have a question, if you can type in your name and also the part of town you live in, that would be really helpful. So Rachel asked, what direction is given to the Boise Police Department from the mayor's office, and more specifically you, Mayor, regarding the face mask mandate, and how are they being instructed to handle medical exceptions?
Oh, sure. So the chief will give direct instructions to the department, but together as a city, we recognize that there are health exemptions related to masking. And so the police department, while if talking with people about masks, do know, as do all city employees and the health district and other folks charged with education, do know that if someone has an exemption, they have an exemption. Now, I want to point out that we have decided as a city and a county and with the health district that we will educate first, that we're less interested in punishing you for not wearing one and much more interested in promoting that you wear them and helping you wear them if you need one, because of the impact it has to protect public health and to keep us back to work. So just to reiterate, masking is super important. It'll make it possible for us to really get to the now normal of what living and working and being in community and recreating, et cetera, is like during COVID to protect members of our community. And the police department, as other departments, recognize that in those requirements there are exemptions, and they're aware of those, and would work through the issue with anyone that either our ambassadors or the police might choose to have a conversation with about masking.
Great, thank you. This next question is from Kay in Southeast Boise. Kay asks, Mayor, why do you allow and or support protests of hundreds, yet require that everyone wear a mask and not support businesses and schools to open?
Sure. Thanks, Kay, for the question. We have a constitutionally protected right to assemble and to free speech. And so no order that a health district or a city might make with regard to gatherings, et cetera, can prevent that. We are not going to get in the way of someone's First Amendment rights to speech and assembly. When we learn that there are gatherings occurring, whether it be at the State House, at City Hall, in parks, we encourage the public to wear masks. When we talk with the organizers of all the different factions that have been coming together, practicing their right to speech and assembly, we've encouraged the organizers themselves to ask their attendees to mask. And we will continue to do that because we know that masks prevent the spread of the virus. I do want to say that the information we're receiving, or that the health district is receiving from those that have COVID, is that where the outbreaks are occurring are in social gatherings. And that's why Central District Health took steps last week to call out the size of social gatherings. If we saw, as we did earlier in the summer, the outbreaks were occurring in bars, we would act accordingly. We have not seen that outbreaks occurred in any of the protests, but what we would do with that information, if we had it, was share that with the public, emphasize again the importance of wearing masks. And when I've watched some of the protests occur at City Hall, there are large numbers of people masking, numbers of people that aren't, and we encourage everyone to do so. I do want businesses to open, and businesses are open. Businesses are struggling, as are individuals struggling. Masking and our requirement that we wear masks in this community is a tool to make sure that businesses that are open stay open. And we're working right now with bar and restaurant owners to make sure that they can come up with protocols that through COVID, as we move through this moment in which we're waiting for a vaccine, that they're able to operate safely. Just as at the City of Boise, we've begun having conversations about how we open the building so that those of you who can't participate digitally or need to come in and see someone can come in and see someone more easily. We've got to take the precautions necessary, follow protocols that are proven so that we can open businesses and City Hall and schools, what have you, and safely and effectively and forever, rather than going up and down. On the school piece, I'm in close conversations with the school districts. It's those school boards and the administration of those school districts that determine when and how to open, in conjunction with the Central District Health for our area, and then other health districts in other areas.
Okay. This next question is from James, who lives in downtown. James asks, what are you going to do to stop our city from turning into San Francisco? And I think specifically he's asking about protecting people who are experiencing homelessness.
Okay. Well, first off, I think daily about how to protect the Boise that we love. That's why I'm here. The public made clear last year that they wanted me to actively work, urgently work day by day to ensure that we protect what we love about Boise, because there's no place like Boise. This is an incredibly special community that all of us have chosen because it's so special. The issues around housing and homelessness go deep. And we're having our police department and our code enforcement and our housing team and mental health and addiction services providers all come together to create a comprehensive plan to address homelessness and housing, because the Band-Aid approach isn't working. People are struggling. We're seeing more, we're working hard to prevent evictions so that there are fewer people that end up looking for housing that are unhoused, working with the shelters to determine how we can help them, working with the county and their funds, because county commissioners are dedicated to this issue as well. It's a tough issue. I wish there was a place that we could point to and say, this is the model we should follow because they did it perfectly. Nobody's figured it out fully. And so what we're doing is saying, instead of in silos, having each department work on the issue, we're going to create a systemic approach to it from the city perspective and make sure that our policies in place, like eviction prevention funds, and the investments we've made in street outreach, so that health teams can and social workers can connect with those experiencing homelessness to see what it is they need and get them the services they need to move off the streets into shelter and ultimately into home. I'm working with the shelters to better understand what they know to be true out there and what they know to be needed to prevent homelessness and to move people from shelter into home. Of course, we just opened Valor Point, which creates housing for 26 formerly homeless vets. And there are many partners working with the city that want to see us do more of that in the years to come. We're focused on doing that. And also, one thing that is new for the city is that during COVID, we worked with homeless shelters, advocates, healthcare professionals to determine how best to move families that are unhoused and the medically fragile into their own units so that COVID didn't spread. That created more room at the shelter. We still have so much work to do, and we're focused on doing it. We're going to have Boise solutions because Boise's unique, as I started out with, a really special place, and we're doing all that we can to protect it.
Great. This next question comes from David in Southeast Boise. It's a two-part question. The first is, what is your opinion of the violent protesting happening in Portland and Seattle? And the second part of this question is, do you think defunding the police is the answer?
Great. Hi, David. Thanks for the question. And first off, unfortunately, we've seen violent protests in communities in cities around this country. It hasn't been limited to just two places. We at the city are committed to protecting individuals as they exercise their right to speech and assembly, to protest. We are also serious about holding accountable anyone that does commit violence in those protests, because that's not okay. Protest, speech, assembly is something that runs deep in our country. It's constitutionally protected rights. We are committed, the police department is committed to protecting those rights. And that's why you've seen what you've seen outside City Hall since the arrival of our new chief. He made it clear to me that we would, because it was so important to me, that we would protect speech and assembly, and that we would have plans to prevent the violence we've seen from other places. That's our goal each and every day, that we set up those free speech zones outside of City Hall when we understand or expect that people will be arriving to protest. You asked about defunding the police. That was settled over a month ago. The budget that I presented to council kept the request by the police department whole. We increased the police department budget by about $1 million, and that's 5 positions. And I want to talk to that because we left it in there because several years ago, it became apparent that we needed, and we were hearing from the community, that we needed patrol officers to protect people from people running red lights, people driving too fast, neighborhood streets that had cars moving through there too quickly. We heard loud and clear the concerns that were raised starting this spring, which have always existed, around the need for preventative services to protect those, especially in marginalized communities that have experienced more violence in other places than here. But we recognize that there are issues here as well. Working with our new Chief Lee, we have taken those 5 positions and built out a mental health response team. Yeah, and the chief is working also to assign people so that we're sure that we have the patrol where we need the patrol as well. We know we need to do more around mental health in partnership with others, because cities aren't authorized to do that work. So we need to convene and build partnerships and come up with a plan to serve those that where mental health, addiction services, housing, all these investments would help them have fewer encounters with the police that really should be the call of last resort. So again, just to reiterate, the budget, we had a work session in June. Just this week on Tuesday night, we took the final vote on the budget that's passed. It kept the police department whole, as we committed to do. It created a larger, I think it might have doubled, a mental health support and response team. And now we'll begin together with the city council and the community the process of looking at what the community investment needs are to prevent the scenarios where calls are made for mental health or other reasons.
Perfect. The next question is from Linda, and also there's several questions here, so if you need me to repeat them, just let me know. So the first question is, why are restaurants and schools still open? And the second part of the question goes to transportation, and Linda's asking, would we be able to invest in consistent and reliable bus service from Columbia Village to downtown? Is this something that you can help with?
Did you say Columbia Village?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sure, Linda, thanks for the question. So restaurants and schools. Restaurants are open because as the governor developed his reopening stages for the state, our city, our county followed those stages 1, 2, 3, 4. The health district moved Boise back to stage 3. But in that stage of the governor's reopening plan, in that stage, it allowed restaurants to stay open at limited capacity. And many of them have moved to having outdoor dining, outdoor seating, to be able to have people in to their establishment, but allow people to have fresh air, which we know most people feel more comfortable in. Schools are open virtually. There are some schools that have opened in person or in a hybrid manner, working with Central District Health. And that's really a question for them as to why they approved some schools' opening plans, because they also had asked that schools go virtual for the next couple of weeks based on these other staging that the governor has created around school reopening. At the city of Boise, it really is our hope and I shouldn't even say hope, it is our intention to work with business owners to do everything we can to help them remain open if they follow protocols that will protect health and people, because we need to keep our economy going and really, in many ways, ensure that our residents have the opportunity to go to work, make the wages, and build the life that all of us expect living in this community. And schools, our kids need to get back to school. But it's my understanding that the school district will continue to work in partnership with the health district. And if the health district is saying we're not ready because of the number of cases we have or where the outbreaks are occurring, the school districts will respond accordingly. Go ahead, Lana.
Thank you. It just takes a second for me to unmute and
sorry.
get between things. No. I'm trying to manage a couple of things here. So the next one is from Jacob in the North End. He says, as a resident of Boise, I'm becoming increasingly frustrated with the amount of litter I find throughout the city, specifically as I walk downtown or down the sidewalks of State Street, Veterans Memorial Parkway, Overland, and other major arteries. I see that much of this litter is actually cigarette butts. While I'm not a smoker, I appreciate that people do have the right to smoke in Boise. If people want to continue to do that, despite the proven health issues it causes, they can go ahead and do so. My focus is more on the litter problem. What can be done proactively to stop people from throwing their used cigarettes out instead of properly disposing of them? I was trying to plan a cigarette cleanup event before COVID began to affect everyone, but doing that would be a reactive step and potentially not raise as much awareness on the issue as I would like.
Sure. That's an interesting question, Jacob, about what we could do proactively. I mean, you would think that all of us have learned over the years that you just don't litter. I know that as a kid, there were those litter campaigns, and I always am so proud of how clean Boise tends to be. And it's often like groups that get together for cleanups. Downtown Boise Association manages the downtown core. But the proactive piece is, there's got to be at some point like an element of just do what you're supposed to do and personal responsibility. But I also do wonder if, like, as you said, that you didn't hold the event because of COVID. I know that in the past, I've been prone to reach down and pick something up. Don't do it quite as much now, especially if I don't have hand sanitizer. And so I wonder if some of that's just occurring as well. Those of us that would more than likely organize a cleanup or pick something up on the street as we saw it might not, because of our concerns around the virus. And so in these times, we got to do what we tell our kids to do, which is clean up after yourself, have some pride in the community, and think of others.
Okay, this next question is from Michael on the central bench. He's asking about how we ensure fair and equitable policies and practices by our public safety agencies. And he asks if you specifically are in support of more transparency from the Boise Police Department.
Oh, sure. Okay. So a couple of things on that. I'm just writing this down so I don't forget the different pieces. Oh, the city council and my office have asked the police department to do a review of their policies. We got quite a few members of our community asking us to do that review. There were 8 policies that were listed. So first off, I want to talk about those I'll even back up, is talk about the value that I see in community policing, the importance of public safety. And in that is making sure that everyone in our community feels safe and that the policies reflect our values around safety and the importance of everyone feeling safe. And so with Chief Lee, the department is doing a review of its policies. They have called out 2 that need to be addressed. And one right away, the interim chief, Weiniger, put a moratorium on a vascular hold that had been allowed in the policies before. So there's a moratorium on that so that Chief Lee can work through some policy reforms there. And there's also another policy that we were asked to review, and the department is doing so, and that's around the duty to intervene if an officer is escalating rather than de-escalating. So those are 2 really important policies that Chief Lee is looking at. We are also, my administration is very committed to transparency, as is Chief Lee. And so, yes, I support more transparency from the police department, but also from all of our departments. So we are working on a tool that will provide more transparency into the budget for our residents. And Chief Lee is working on a review of data that could and should be made available to the public so that there's greater transparency on what actions are taken, what kind of calls are made, et cetera. And that also then helps us address the policies or needs in the community. If we see that more calls are being made related to mental health than other things, which we are, then we know that we need to come up with plans to prevent the calls, but also to respond to the calls in safer and more effective ways. And then we also have an Office of Police Oversight that reviews cases, takes citizen complaints, and it's our intent, the council's intent and my intent, to ensure that there's more transparency there so that the public knows what concerns are being shared, and then what investigations are being conducted, and then what's found in those investigations.
Okay, this one came from Heather, and she stated a few months ago, an announcement was made that taxes would not be raised. Is that, she's looking for more clarification as to if that applies to all Boise residents.
Sure. So we announced a couple months ago that we would be a city is allowed to increase its revenue by 3%, and then take into account growth. And so we announced May, June, end of May, mid-June, I can't quite remember, that we would be taking 0% of the 3% that we're allowed to take. And we did that for the first time in at least 16 years, possibly longer, because we heard loud and clear that our residents are struggling in this tough time. And so while we took 0% of the 3 were allowed, we did, of course, take into account the impacts that growth had on our revenue streams, because we don't want existing residents to have to pay for the impacts and the needs and services that are created as our city continues to grow. So when you get your tax bill, look, there's a couple different things to see. You'll see that our levy rate is based on the fact that we took 0% increase, but we took growth so that you as an existing resident aren't stuck with a bill to pay for the growth. There are other agencies on your tax bill that'll be reflected. You'll see the county, you'll see the school district. There might be some mosquito abatement district, I can't remember. And then it all depends on your assessment as well, how the assessments moved. But the county assessor has talked a little bit about the steps he took in response to COVID as well. So it was our commitment that every year, and I made this commitment at the beginning of the year, every year we would review the impact of taking 3% on our residents and the impact of not taking it or taking a smaller amount on the services we are able to provide, the value that that brings to our community, the investments that are important to have a strong and vibrant and safe community for everyone. And then we have to come up with ways to balance those two things.
Thank you. So now we're going to move into questions from YouTube. And Deborah from the East End says, I love the art. I wish there was an art movement, something coordinated that could bring Boise artists together. Do you know if there's something in the plans?
So Deborah, thank you. I love our public art as well. The Department of Arts and History right now during COVID has different online convenings where they're trying to bring people together and showcase art and artists by local artists. In terms of like larger convenings of bringing all the artists together, I'm not sure, but I bet Lana could connect with the Department of Arts and History and see if there's any information we could get you. Right now, given the rules around convenings and group sizes, everything I imagine would be virtual. But I think that our city is so lucky to have a vibrant emergent artist community as well as a vibrant established artist community. And we remain committed to investing in the arts because I look at it and think, well, for thousands of years, governments have invested in the arts because they tell our story in retrospect. Look at what's behind me, this quilt that is the larger installation is on the outside of City Hall, along with a timeline that goes through what's happened in the Valley and puts in perspective the arrival of different people, the advocacy work that different groups in our community have done, the kind of, the history of our Valley as we know it and see it, but through art, and it makes it approachable and so important to have those records in the long run. So that's what we're trying to do as a city, and then provide opportunity for artists to create installations for the city, but also for the community at large.
And it looks like Deborah has a follow-up question. She's asking—
Oh, I love that she's still there. That's great. Hi, Deborah.
Is asking if Bosco, which is the Boise Open Studios Collective organization, which does like the open studio tours usually in the fall, do we know if that will be canceled this year?
I don't know. And that's actually something that we could get back to you on, Deborah. I'm not sure. I love Bosco. It's actually Bosco made it so that I discovered Rachel Tennelock years ago when my daughter was young. We visited her backyard studio, and now actually some of her work is part of a gift that I give when visitors come to Boise or when we're showcasing the city. And I had discovered in Bosco that another favorite artist of mine actually lived down the street from me, and I had no idea. And I didn't know it until I saw the Bosco map and realized that he lived there. So it's a great event, an incredible opportunity for our community to connect with artists and to potentially buy something or just to meet someone new and have a conversation about their work. And then it's personal and there's a connection there. But I don't know if it will be occurring, and that's something we can get back to you on.
Great. This one is from Justin on the central bench. He's asking when and if the city will address redistricting in Boise for council elections.
Sure. So this is what's happening, Justin. As you know, the legislature passed the bill and, it's law. So as a city, we have to figure out how to implement it. In talking with Meridian, who also is likely conditioned by the rules, we've come up with some questions that we have in terms of implementation. We've shared those with Senator Winder and are in conversations about some fixes to make it clearer how we do this right to be able to move forward with more certainty. This is what we've got to do. This is law now, and we have a rule that there's one person, one vote. The census is happening right now. So our concerns are, and our questions around it were this: if we do it this year for 2021, then we'd have to use 2010 census data. Our city has grown a lot since then. There are portions of our city that have been annexed since then. And so it would be harder to have the one person, one vote certainty with those old numbers. We could do it, but the costs that we'd then incur to do it once for 2021 and then have what's really supposed to happen is the legislature makes legislative districts and precincts. The county then looks at districts and precincts, and then the city is supposed to keep precincts whole. So then we'd be redoing it in 2022. So there weren't guidelines or rules for how we implement it. So we wanted to get the legislature's understanding on that so that we can do it right. And once we have that, if there are some fixes to the bill that will make it easier for us to implement it, they take care of those in the next session, and then we'd go about starting it. But I say we, like the council, the city council is 6 members. It will be 6 districts. They'll work through that. Our administration will support that effort, and we'll need to make sure that when we divide up districts, that they're reflective of neighborhoods, precincts, everyone being represented, and we're trying to do it right.
Thanks, Mayor. This one is from Eric in North End. He says, thank you for doing this. It is really nice to be able to hear from you directly. Once we do get through this, what is being done to keep downtown growing and help businesses that are currently there be successful?
Thanks, Eric. I really enjoy these too. I just wish I could see all of you because it does, when you can see so many people that are listening in, and just like other larger Zooms, it just feels like we're all together. And I really miss being in a library or in a park and seeing the faces of people that love this place as much as I do and love it enough to show up for something like this. And I really look forward to being able to do that again safely. Until then, we're doing it this way and appreciate the questions. On the what are we doing to support businesses? I first off want to say that we have an economic recovery task force that my administration pulled together with the charge of coming up with focus areas for us to support recovery and to set our community up right for economic advancement and opportunity in the long run. So, and we wanted it to be a quick and focused effort. So we brought together the representatives of the universities, some think tanks, businesses here in the region to work through some questions for us. They'll be releasing their recommendations next week or the week after. I just saw a draft of their report. And so they have their final meeting next week and will be approving a report that we'll share with the community. And from there, we'll set about making a plan, an actual plan for our efforts so that we can measure our progress and make sure that as a city, while we can't do it all. There's no one-stop shop for all the solutions, but as a city that we're efficiently using our people time to support recovery, and also where we can, making smart investments to spur opportunity for our residents. And then of course, downtown, many businesses won't be bringing their employees back until end of year or early next year. And so we're in constant communication with businesses to better understand their plans so that we can better understand the impact that that might have on the downtown core. But also finally, we're working with small businesses downtown to enable them to move into parking spots so that they can have more patio space, to enable them to, like on 8th Street, shut down a street that the city was charged with, to create more patio space. We're doing everything that we can to partner with businesses to ensure that in these months, especially kind of the retail ones where people are comfortable being out on the streets, stopping into establishments, having a bite to eat or a drink, that we've worked with other agencies to serve them, to ensure that their revenues are as high as they can be this summer. Because of course, once it's cold, it's going to be a little different. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. This is not going to be a quick snap turnaround. I believe that we'll recover more resiliently and stronger than we might have, because we all took steps quickly and we made sacrifices, recognizing that we had to protect public health. And now we're asking what's next. We have to imagine what the economy of the future looks like and make investments accordingly to ensure that we, our residents of Boise, have opportunities of the future. And we do that in partnership with businesses, universities, think tanks, agencies that can provide support to really set the table for future recovery.
Great. This one is a little bit longer from Michael on the depot bench, but I want to be sure I capture his full question. So bear with me for just a second here as I read it. Michael asks, you and Councilwoman Clegg have had protesters at your houses. I'm on the fence on this one and would like to know your thoughts. My initial thought is that someone's personal residence should be off limits, but then I've heard the opinion that social activism is not about people's comfort, which I can see as well. Do you feel that the public's First Amendment rights to protest should be limited to not include the areas of private residences, or are protests in such areas fine as long as they're peaceful and not threatening?
Sure. Michael, I appreciate that question because I've given a lot of thought of that too. First off, I'll tell you a little bit about what's happened at our home. And I'll preface it with saying that there is nothing more important to me than the right to speech and assembly. It makes who we are as Americans so unique. I've traveled to places where that's not allowed, and it's helped me to understand how important it is and what a gift it is for us to be able to step up, stand up, speak out against those in power, against the policies that could, should, or are in existence. And it's a right that many of us take for granted, that when I've seen that it doesn't exist, I realize we can't take it for granted. All that to be said, as I said earlier, there's a difference between speech that is peaceful and in protest, and speech designed to incite violence. That's where the line is, not a location, but the line. And that's why at City Hall, in cooperation with Chief Lee, we've established free speech zones, and we know there are going to be protests happening. We've created a protected place for people that need to come into the buildings for hearings to come in. People have been to my house. They've been to my house quite a bit. And I'll tell you that the first time it happened was a shock. It was July 3rd. There was a large crowd of people armed. Again, we have the right to be armed outside my home. I felt completely safe, but also shocked and really worried about my neighbors. And it was like that initial jolt of realizing that, oh, something in Boise has changed, and it's happening around the country. Colleagues of mine are experiencing the same thing, where people are now coming to our houses. Every Sunday in July and the 1st in August, there were people at our house on the sidewalk in front of our house for a couple hours. And then, as you all know, that it happened to Elaine last weekend. I recognize that people have a right to assemble wherever that may be. And ultimately, it's up to the organization and the people involved to decide if they feel that it's right to be in front of someone's home, in someone's neighborhood, or if they think it's more appropriate to be where these decisions are being made, as they were showing up and have continued to show up on Tuesday nights when council is in session.
Several people on YouTube chat are asking if you could speak a little bit to how you chose the strategic priorities that were released a couple of weeks ago.
Sure. So I'm just going to write this down. A lot of thought went into that and a lot of conversations with many, many people around this community. And first off, I ran on the promise of creating a city for everyone in which residents are engaged, leadership and the administration is accessible and accountable and transparent. And we're imagining new solutions with a sense of urgency to meet the needs, expectations, hopes, and dreams of Boiseans. Of course, we never imagined that a pandemic would hit and that we'd be experiencing the economic impacts that have ensued alongside the health impacts. But I've stayed focused on both, managing the city, working through policy priorities that reflect what I've heard from residents around the city and my understanding of the needs today, as well as the needs of the future, while managing and attempting to protect public health, so managing decisions around that, and then seeking recovery economically in addition to resilience and long-term opportunity. So through the budget process, we started to outline some of the priorities I had. I took into account the recommendations from our transition committees and I think I had 30 plus, close to 40 listening sessions in the last year, 15 months. And then looked at what we're doing as a city, what the times demand of us, and then prioritized accordingly. My focus is on ensuring that the policies of the city of Boise place people at the center, and that we address, that means that everyone needs a home that they can afford. If you're gonna work in the city, we want you to be able to afford a home here. And as we grow, that gets tougher and tougher. I have a lot of priorities that were listed around a home for everyone. Civic engagement and civic life is the core of our democracy. For over 200 years, we have shown as Americans that we get together, we associate, we speech, we protest, we organize, and we create better communities for it. And I want the city of Boise to have, as an administration, accessible leaders in the departments, myself as mayor, and we need to create ways for our residents to engage and actively participate in shaping the future of our community. And so those became priorities. Transportation, while we don't have the same traffic and congestion as we used to, and we know that we will again at some point. And so imagining how we build relationships regionally to address the very real regional transit needs is important, as is coming up with ways within our own community to get our residents from home to work and everywhere in between. So you see that in my priorities. And then of course, when we think about the economy, like the most basic thing for our residents is opportunity, the ability to build a life here the way my husband and I were able to do when we moved here right out of college, got jobs, bought a home, started having a family, built a life. I want that for everyone here. And so to do that, we have to ensure that we're thinking about how we create opportunity from the challenges of the day. And that's around economic recovery. It's around investments in clean energy and climate innovation. And so you see that in my plans as well. And ultimately, I guess I'd just say in wrapping up this question, it's on leaders to take into account the needs, hopes, wishes, wants, desires of the residents in the community in which they serve. And then it's on us to make the decisions about what we will do, what we can do, and what we must do to serve our community and to create opportunity. So that's what I did. I took it all in. I looked at the impact of the times. I talked with city leaders and staff about what's being done already, what we can do more of, better, faster, and then prioritize where we'll spend our time and make our investments in the coming years to meet the needs of our residents.
Thank you. Joe Evans, he is asking along the same veins, what are you doing for the housing market to bring cost down. Are we investing in high density housing, mass transit? His second question also is, will the Ada County Boise City Housing
Oh,
Authority
shoot, I just
invest in more
froze.
housing? Uh-oh.
Oh, could you ask that again? I heard
Yes,
Joe was
absolutely.
asking about what I'm doing around, or we always need to say it's not one person. It's a city and administration in partnership with so many people in this community, but around housing affordability. And then I didn't catch the second part.
Sure, I'll reread the second part of the question. He's asking specifically about whether we're investing in high density housing and mass transit to help with housing costs. And then the second part of the question is if you know whether the Ada County Boise City Housing Authority will invest in more housing.
Oh, sure. I'm just writing that down. Thanks, Joe, for your question. And first off, in many ways, you hit the nail on the head with regard to housing affordability. We have a distinct challenge in this community where the market continues to increase, and study after study shows that the prices for living here aren't in keeping with the wages that we receive as Boise residents. And so that's a struggle. And no, as I said earlier, no one person, one administration can do it all. But there are ways that we can encourage the development of housing that's affordable at all different budget levels in our community. Some of it is just making sure that we have it. But then others is making sure that we use our tools as a city to encourage it. So we have aggressively been implementing the vision I had for a housing land bank, where the city looks at the land assets it has. And Franklin and Orchard is a great example that started before me. And we were just able to wrap up the negotiating. But this year we've acquired more land for it, where the city puts forth a piece of property, ideally along a transit line and near neighborhood activity centers and schools, so that families can walk to school, can access the basic needs they have, like grocery stores or transit to get to work. And we put that out with a request that in exchange for the land, the housing meet various budget requirements for families. And so we're going to do more of that, because we like what we've seen with the partnership between the developer at Franklin and Orchard and the neighborhood and the park. And it will create homes for, I think, close to 200 families in Boise that can afford housing at various price points, right next to a bus line. And there will be retail and other public spaces for the public as well. So a great new neighborhood really developed on some city land. We're going to do more of that. We have the zoning work, the what's it called, the official name of it, but the effort to look at Boise zoning codes citywide to make sure that the priorities we have around housing close to transit, more people living closer to jobs, opportunities, and schools is reflected in the codes that we have. And so that process is starting this fall, and we'll be announcing the committee shortly that will be invited to be a part of that, the citizen committee that's reflective of people throughout the city with various backgrounds. And I'm also, from a housing perspective, looking at an incentive program where, in exchange for protecting sensitive areas or providing affordable housing, and that could be workforce housing, et cetera. We'll have, each project that is developed will be specific to the need at the time, that the city would look at, like helping the developer through the process, potentially letting things get a little higher or having less parking because they're right on a transit line. So that's a policy that we'll bring to work session with the city council next week or a couple weeks from now. So there are quite a few housing advancements that we're doing, because we know that there's not, like, while there's not one entity that can solve the problem, there's also not one silver bullet, and we need a portfolio of creative solutions to help ensure that housing is affordable and accessible within our community. And on the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority, Elaine Clegg is on that board. She's a great person to reach out to discuss their intentions. I am not sure their plans for more housing. They have some land holdings. They're in the housing business, but I don't have specifics as to what they plan the coming year.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to be mindful of the time. We have about 5 minutes left. We have one question that we haven't gotten to on YouTube. So maybe I will ask you this one. And if you have any thoughts to wrap up, then we can do that. Okay. So this one is from Marissa in Southwest Boise. And Marissa says, Mayor, can you talk a little bit on the canal pathways and how the city is supporting that effort?
Sure. I'm sure that there's more than one Marissa in Southwest Boise, but I'm curious to know if this is the Marissa in Southwest Boise that I know who's a neighborhood leader. But regardless, hello. Canal pathways are a priority of mine, and both Council President and Council Member Hallie Burton are working on this issue as well. You probably saw in our budget that we set aside some funds to work with canal companies to come up with a plan for how we might tackle the issue, recognizing that just like the Green Belt took almost 50 years to recognize the full vision, a lot of work, many years, important partnerships and creativity will be required to make these pathways possible. I envision a network that connects our farmland to our foothills and everywhere in between. We are so lucky to have a network of canals out there, but there are many people we have to work with to make that possible. It's the irrigation companies, the residents that have easements over the canals, the neighborhood associations, et cetera. It is a priority. We're excited to work on it. We see it as, in many ways, as our community grows denser, we need to think about what open spaces look like in the future. And that'll be parks, it'll be trails, it'll be the green belt, of course, but long spindly ribbons from the farmlands to our foothills or the farmlands to the river can and should be part of that. Not only for just open spaces for neighbors to enjoy in any time of day, but also as new ways to move from home to work. And so I'm really excited for the work that is beginning and the partnerships that I'm sure we'll be building to realize a vision of canal connections from farmlands to foothills. Oh, and now I'm supposed to wrap up. I forgot. Thanks everybody for joining today, for watching through YouTube Live, for submitting your questions in advance, and those of you that did it today. This is one of my favorite things to do. As I said in response to somebody's question, I can't remember now who it was. As I said then, I wish it was in person, but truly appreciate the opportunity to answer questions, not just so that I can talk, but because it gives me a better sense of what's on your minds as residents of Boise, because we are here in service to you. And in these times, we're attempting to come up with ways to connect, because the uniqueness of Boise is in its people and the place in which we've all chosen to live, the lives that we build, and our shared commitment to creating a city that welcomes all and creates opportunity for all of us. And these are just a little bit of the time that I get to spend with constituents, but really appreciate the opportunity, the time each of you takes to put thought into what you'd like to hear from me about. But most importantly, that to me signals that there are so many Boiseans that are doing what I know we all do best, which is thinking about what's next, thinking about our neighbors, thinking about the opportunities that we hope to have. And all of this is a recipe for our long-term ability to come together, face crisis as we are, but most importantly, recover more resiliently for it. So take care, everybody. Be well. To all of you parents out there, I'm juggling so much right now with back to school. Good luck. And to all of you that wish you were back in your offices while you're working with from your homes, I hear you. And we are working hard to come up with ways to provide more services in person in the coming weeks and months. But know that all of us together make Boise so special. We're all kind of moving through this moment in different ways, but love the opportunities to come together and look forward to more conversations in the future. Take care.